Donald Trump stood at the edge of the chaos, towering behind a makeshift podium of arrogance and applause. Surrounded by loyalists, he leaned forward, scanning the crowd like a man surveying a battlefield he thought he'd already won. Then he saw her, Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't even holding a sign. She stood tall, arms crossed, her gaze locked on him like she'd already read the script and knew exactly how it ended. Trump squinted, tilted his head, and with the twisted smirk that had become his signature, he pointed toward her. "Look at that moron," he said, voice amplified, eyes gleaming. The crowd sucked in its breath like a single living thing. Gasps, then murmurs, then a split-second silence that seemed to freeze time. Reporters jolted their cameras. Phones flew into the air like weapons of record. Someone dropped a coffee cup. Another whispered, "Did he just—" Crockett didn't move. Her expression didn't change. But something shifted in the atmosphere, subtle and seismic. The insult traveled faster than his entourage could spin it, faster than his team could tweet a defense. It wasn't just the word. It was who he said it to. In that moment, Trump didn't insult a person. He insulted a movement, a generation, a truth too big to silence with a microphone. The crowd started to shift. Some looked to Crockett. Others looked to Trump, as if unsure whether to cheer or retreat. But Jasmine? She just stepped forward, slow and deliberate, as if every step were made of purpose. She took the mic. The wind paused. Even the chants faded into background noise, but Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. What she said next would silence a crowd and spiral into something even Trump never expected. The rally had been boiling long before Trump opened. His mouth. This wasn't just another public appearance, another speech drowned in slogans. This was downtown Houston, ground zero for a protest that had been building pressure for weeks, a flashpoint gathering of civil rights leaders, immigrant advocates, and furious voters demanding answers. The issue? A proposed voter ID expansion. Bill critics were calling Jim Crow 2.0 in a suit, and Trump showed up like gasoline poured over already smoldering coals. His arrival wasn't announced. He wasn't listed on any official schedule. But the moment his SUV motorcade turned onto the block, the crowd knew the game had changed. Cell phones shot up like periscopes. Some cheered, others jeered. Tensions weren't rising, they were spiking. The chants grew sharper, angrier, laced with disbelief. Why is he here? Inside the crowd, Jasmine Crockett hadn't come to speak. She came to stand. The Texas congresswoman was there on behalf of her District 1 bruised by redistricting, one threatened by the very legislation being protested. She was supposed to be observing, not leading, listening, not speaking. But then Trump took the stage. And then he saw her. That word moron wasn't just an insult hurled at her. It was a strategic detonation, a message to the cameras, to the base, to anyone watching. This is what I think of women like her. And people were watching. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. Trump calls Crockett a moron, lit up trending pages. The hashtag split along fault lines. Stand with Jasmine, talk moron gate. Trump meltdown, some defenders laughed it off. It's just Trump being Trump, they said. Don't be so sensitive. But for many, it hit differently. Because they'd seen this playbook before the casual dismissal, the loud belittling, the way women of color were too often painted, as loud, dumb, or dangerous just for existing in power. And that day, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just standing for herself. She was standing for every young girl told to speak softer, every immigrant told their accent was a flaw, every voter made to feel like their ID, their name, their presence wasn't enough. She stepped up not because she was on the list, but because silence would have felt like surrender. The phones kept rolling. The crowd split open to let her through. Even Trump's podium seemed to shrink as she drew closer, one stride at a time. Her team tried to wave her off. She didn't blink. The mic was there. The moment was waiting. Because this wasn't about one insult. It was about power, dignity, identity, and whether or not America was still capable of standing up to the voices that tried to shrink it. Jasmine Crockett wasn't supposed to speak that day. But something far older than scheduling had taken hold. But to understand what was really happening, we need to go back not just hours, but years. Insult has always been Donald Trump's first language. Long before the political rallies, before the red hats and the relentless tweets, Trump understood one thing better than most. Dehumanize, and you control the stage. His insults weren't random. They were targeted, calibrated, performed like theater. It was never about debate. It was about domination. From the podium to the press room, he perfected the art of name-calling as a tool of power. Jabs became identity. Markers. Crooked Hillary. Crazy Nancy. Sleepy Joe. The insult was the brand. The person was reduced. The crowd laughed. The press chased it. And the next insult rolled out like a sequel with a guaranteed box office. But there was a pattern, especially when the target was a woman of color. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez challenged tax cuts, she wasn't Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. She was a young bartender who doesn't know what she's talking about. When Ilhan Omar spoke out against war, she wasn't Representative Omar. She was told to go back to where she came from. Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, Maxine Waters. The list grew, and with every name came a tactic question: the intellect, challenge the loyalty, insult the appearance, and drown them in noise. And for Trump, it worked, at least for a while. The media ate it up. Every insult was a headline. Every slur became a soundbite. The spotlight stayed fixed on him, and the audience never quite noticed how often the butt of the joke looked the same: brown, bold, and unafraid. So, when he locked eyes with Jasmine Crockett and spat out the word moron, it wasn't a glitch. It was a continuation, a legacy, another attempt to shrink a woman who refused to stay in the margins. But something was different this time. Because Trump's power wasn't what it once was. The post-presidency era had changed the battlefield. He no longer commanded the rose garden, he commanded rallies. No longer interrupted press briefings, now he interrupted protests. And the people weren't as willing to laugh anymore. They'd seen what 4 years of insult as governance had done. They'd watched democracy bend under the weight of petty name-calling and cruel nicknames. And Jasmine Crockett wasn't a newcomer. She wasn't looking for the spotlight. She had walked through fire-already Texas courtrooms, Capitol hearings, voter suppression battles that most politicians wouldn't dare touch. She didn't fear the insult because she'd learned something most of his opponents hadn't. When a man like Trump calls you a name, he's already losing. But Trump didn't know that. Not yet. In his mind, this was just another scene, another crowd, another opponent to be reduced and forgotten by nightfall. He saw the camera flashes, heard the crowd groan, and assumed the mic still belonged to him. He didn't see the calculation in Crockett's eyes, the silence she chose instead of shouting, the way she let his words hang in the air like a trap he'd set for himself. For years, Trump had insulted his way out of accountability. He'd weaponized language like a shield against consequence. But Jasmine wasn't playing his game. She wasn't looking to match insult for insult. She was waiting for the right moment to make a point that couldn't be memed away. This wasn't escalation. This was exposure. Because if you really looked at the pattern, if you traced the names, the faces, the fury, the villain wasn't hiding anymore. He was right there, reflected in every slur, every eye roll, every snide dismissal. The villain wasn't just Donald Trump. It was what he represented. A worldview that saw dignity as weakness, intelligence as threat, and identity as something to mock, not respect. But what Trump didn't know? He wasn't talking to just another congresswoman. He was talking to the Jasmine Crockett before the cameras. before Congress, before the headlines. Jasmine Crockett was a girl from St. Louis who learned early what it meant to be underestimated. Her mother worked in education. Her father served in the army. In their home, dignity wasn't a word, it was a responsibility. Speak with truth. Stand with people. Never blink when someone tries to make you smaller. She carried those values into law school at the University of Houston, where she spent more time in community meetings than at parties. While others chased clerkships, she chased justice pro bono defense, housing rights, police brutality cases. No one wanted to touch. And when she passed the bar, she went where the fight was, East Texas courtrooms. No national spotlights, no praise. Just late nights, impossible cases, and clients who'd been told by the system to give up. She didn't wear flashy suits. She didn't soften her tone. She showed up. One night, after securing the release of a wrongly jailed teenager, a local judge told her, "You've got too much fire to last in this game." She smiled, packed her files, and said, "I'm not here to last. I'm here to light it up." Her name started to spread. Quietly. Not in D.C., but in the neighborhoods where people remembered what it meant to be heard. She fought voter suppression not from podiums, but by knocking on doors. She sued landlords and stood against corrupt cops. When asked why she spent so much time in places most politicians ignored, she said, "Because that's where the silence is loudest." By the time she ran for Texas House, she didn't have corporate backers. She had church ladies, public defenders, and first-time voters who saw something they hadn't seen in years. Representation that didn't apologize for its roots. And she won. In Austin, she became a thorn. Not just in the side of Republicans pushing voter suppression, but even in the silence of her own party when compromise went too far. Her hearings were legend. Calm, clipped tone. Laser-focused questions. And when her time ran out, she kept talking. One clip changed everything. A viral video caught her dismantling a bill that would have stripped voting access from communities of color. With just a binder, a pen, and her voice, she tore down every clause. No shouting, no theatrics, just facts. But it felt like fire. Within hours, Jasmine Crockett trended. Young women reposted it with captions like, "This is how you fight back." Veterans called her the closest thing to Barbara Jordan we've seen in a decade. She wasn't trying to be famous. She was trying to be effective. And then came the call from Washington. When Texas' 30th District opened, national figures told her to wait her turn. Back someone safer. Someone who could build bridges. But Jasmine had heard those words before. Bridges too often meant bending. And waiting your turn meant losing your voice, so she ran. And she won. Her arrival in Congress didn't come with fireworks, but it came with purpose. While others courted donors, she courted truth. While others spun stories, she chased receipts. And when cameras did find her, it was never because she shouted. It was because she couldn't be shaken. In hearing after hearing, she calmly dismantled disinformation, stared down arrogance, and defended the silenced not with rage, but with facts sharpened like blades. Even her critics admitted, she didn't flinch, she didn't fold, and she didn't blink. When asked how she stayed composed while being interrupted, disrespected, and dismissed, she said, "I've spent my whole life walking into rooms people thought I didn't belong in, and I've stayed because I knew I did." This wasn't just a career. It was a calling, and it had been forged not in think tanks, but in the fire of real lives, real losses, and real stakes. So when she stood in that protest crowd, and Trump hurled that word moron, he wasn't speaking to a stranger. He was speaking to a storm. And on that day, in front of the crowd, with cameras rolling, Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She raised the stakes. She took the mic like it wasn't, borrowed like it was already hers. The crowd parted in breathless silence, tension hanging in the Texas air like static before a storm. Jasmine Crockett stood center stage now, not by invitation, but by inevitability. Across from her, Donald Trump shifted, arms folded, face already wearing that mix of mockery and impatience. He leaned toward his own mic, lips pursed like he was ready to cut her off again. But Crockett didn't even glance at him. She looked at the crowd. "Good afternoon," she said, voice low, unshaken. "I wasn't planning to speak today, but it seems someone called my name." The crowd stirred. A ripple of laughter, nervous, unsure, passed through the audience. Trump's voice pierced the quiet. "Yeah, and I called it right. You don't even know what you're talking about." "Typical." A few of his supporters chuckled. But it landed flat. Crockett turned her head slightly toward him. No expression, just precision. "Mr. Trump," she said evenly, "I've argued in courtrooms where murderers tried harder to interrupt me than you just did. And I'm still here. You can wait your turn." That landed. The silence that followed was different now. He opened his mouth, then thought better of it. The crowd was listening, and she had momentum. Crockett faced forward again, letting the weight of her words build like a slow drumbeat. "You know," she began, "I've been called a lot of names in my life. Angry, uppity, too smart, too black, too loud, too quiet. And just now, moron." She let the word sit, untouched. "I've learned something about name-callers," she continued. "They're rarely interested in truth. They're afraid of it. They use words like weapons because facts would break them." Trump's team fidgeted near the back. His face reddened. He tried again. "You've done nothing for this country. All you do is talk." Crockett turned to him fully this time. "You're wrong," she said. "I talk because I've done something. I talk because I've earned this mic. And unlike you, I don't talk to divide. I talk to defend." Another ripple through the crowd. Even neutral onlookers, reporters, organizers felt the shift. The balance of power was tilting. Crockett's tone sharpened, not in volume but in clarity. "You spent 4 years calling people names. Journalists, judges, war heroes, women, whole communities. And you did it because you thought the louder voice always wins." She stepped forward. "But the truth, Mr. Trump? The truth doesn't need to yell." Trump took a half step back. He tried to laugh it off, motioning to the crowd like a comic who'd lost the room. But the room wasn't laughing. They were watching her. Phones were pointed at her. Eyes locked in. Every word landing like stone on steel. Crockett softened her voice again, drawing them in close. "You came here to insult. I came here to listen. You came to divide. I came to serve. You called me a moron. But when people can't defeat your facts, they'll always attack your name." A woman near the front wiped a tear from her cheek. A teenage girl clutched her phone tighter. Crockett exhaled slowly. "I know who I am. I know what I've built. Do you?" And then, with one sentence, just one, Jasmine Crockett ended the conversation, and maybe even ended his power. She didn't shout it. She didn't need to. Jasmine Crockett stood still, hands lightly gripping the mic, gaze locked forward, and said with surgical precision, "I'd rather be called a moron by a man who incited an insurrection than be praised by one who mistook cruelty for courage." Time froze. The air was ripped clean out of the lungs of everyone present. There was no immediate cheer, no chant, just stunned, electric silence. Trump blinked. Once. Twice. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Then boom. A roar from the crowd, raw and rising, not from politeness but from pent-up release. The kind that starts in your spine and floods out like thunder. Phones shot into the sky. Reporters scrambled to catch every angle. A man in a wheelchair punched the air and shouted, "Say it again!" Crockett didn't. She just stood there centered, calm, unshaken. The look on her face said everything. You brought a punchline. I brought a verdict. Behind Trump, his aides huddled like a collapsing campaign team on election night. His press handler leaned into his phone, whispering something urgent. Another staffer waved toward the cameras, mouthing, cut it now!" But it was far too late. On X, the clip exploded like wildfire. "Justice, Gem. Did y'all see what Reptor Jasmine Crockett just did?" Trump looked like someone unplugged his brain mid-rant. Instant icon energy. A Gen Z's left. Cruelty for courage? That line belongs in a museum. Veterans against hate. Mic drop of the century. From a congresswoman. In Texas. Let that sink in. Within minutes, memes flooded timelines. Side-by-side shots. Trump pointing, captioned, "She's a moron." Crockett mid-delivery, captioned, "This you?" Another viral image showed Crockett photoshopped as a Jedi. Her mic transformed into a lightsaber, slicing through Trump's speech bubble. TikToks layered the moment over epic movie scores. Edits dropped her one-liner in slow motion, with text, "Truth doesn't need to yell." Even late-night shows jumped in. Jimmy Kimmel opened with, "Trump called Jasmine Crockett a moron." She responded like Maya Angelou with a side of laser beam. And now, he's hiding behind the curtains. But none of that matched the look on Trump's face as the crowd broke open around him. He wasn't enraged, not yet. He was cornered. He shuffled his papers, looked off stage, tried to laugh it off, a brittle, joyless bark that didn't land. "I mean, she's obviously angry," he said, but the mic caught the tremor in his voice. Crockett didn't respond. That was part of the power. She'd said what she came to say. She didn't need a second blow. The first had landed, shattered, and settled into the room like dust after a demolition. One supporter near the front shouted, "You hear that, Donald? That's what dignity sounds like." Another added, "We got your moron right here." Somewhere in the crowd, an older woman held up a handmade sign that suddenly felt prophetic. "Silence us, we amplify." The mood had shifted completely. Trump's usual script: provoke, dominate. Control was in tatters. He tried to bait her into a shouting match. Instead, she walked into the fire, rewrote the rules, and left him standing in the ashes of his own tactics. The mic in her hand was no longer just equipment. It was evidence. On CNN, the clip was played back 8 times in 2 hours. MSNBC brought on language experts to break down the rhetorical precision. Fox tried to pivot, calling it disrespectful, angry, over the line, but even some of their own viewers weren't buying it because the sentence wasn't angry. It was art. One sentence, 30 words, a complete moral reversal. In the eyes of millions, Trump went from aggressor to embarrassed, from bully to buffoon. And Crockett, she didn't just defend herself, she reframed the entire moment. The insult he hurled was supposed to stick. Instead, it boomeranged and shattered the image he'd been selling for years. That he was strong, that he was brave, that he could humiliate and still walk away respected. But Crockett revealed the hollowness. She did what so many tried and failed to do: expose him without echoing him. And that's why it hit so hard, because it didn't sound like politics. It sounded like truth. Raw, undeniable, calmly delivered by a woman who had walked through far worse and didn't need to yell to make her point. In the hours that followed, Crockett's team couldn't keep up with the calls. Interview requests, endorsements, donations, flooding in. Grassroots groups begging her to headline rallies. Students asking for her speech transcript to share in class. But Jasmine? She stepped away from the mic, handed it back without ceremony, and walked off stage like she was walking out of a courtroom she'd just won. As she moved past the rows of people, some reached out to touch her hand. Others whispered, "Thank you." One little girl stared up at her, wide-eyed, and simply said, "Can I be like you?" Crockett smiled gently and replied, "You already are." The crowd was still electric, still digesting what had just happened. Trump lingered for another 5 minutes, rambling, trying to claw back momentum with old catchphrases and tired jabs. But the crowd's energy had turned. His words fell flat. Jasmine Crockett had entered that space uninvited. But she left as the name on everyone's lips. She didn't just win the moment. She redefined it, but the damage wasn't just viral. It was institutional. Within hours, it wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. By sundown, 3 hashtags were trending nationally. Crockett clapback, Moron Gate, Cruelty, Isn't. T-Courage, TikToks layered her mic drop over symphonic crescendos, Marvel. Battle scenes and Beyoncé walk-ons. One video, a slow-motion loop of her now iconic sentence, "I'd rather be called a moron by a man who incited an insurrection," racked up 12 million views by breakfast. The internet had chosen its hero. Every corner of progressive Twitter lit up. Black voters unite. Jasmine Crockett didn't come to play. She came to finish a chapter America's been stuck in since 2016. Indivisible MKE. It wasn't just a takedown. It was a masterclass in political grace under fire. Gen Z justice. She said what we've been screaming into pillows for years. Calm, clean, brutal. Cable news raced to catch up with the timeline. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow called it the cleanest rhetorical knockout since Obama at the 2004 DNC. On CNN, a roundtable of analysts dissected the clip like it was the Zapruder film. Even conservative outlets, trying to downplay the moment, couldn't ignore it. Fox ran headlines like, "Rep. Crockett lashes out," but commenters underneath weren't buying the spin. She didn't lash. She led. Say what you want, but he looked like a deer in headlights. Trump's team, blindsided, went into immediate PR triage. An aide released a statement claiming Crockett took the president's words out of context. Another floated that she had pre-planned the confrontation, but screenshots showed otherwise. Timestamps, live streams, and crowd footage painted a clear, organic narrative. It happened. She struck. He stumbled, and the country watched it unfold in real time. More than just social clout, the ripple effects were immediate and measurable. By the 36-hour mark, Crockett's campaign donation portal crashed twice under the surge of contributions. Grassroots PAC launched a billboard campaign quoting her one-liner across major cities. A national education nonprofit requested to license her clip for civic engagement lessons. Requests poured in for her to keynote summits, panels, and youth conferences nationwide. She hadn't just gone viral. She'd gone vital, and the political class felt the tremor. AOC tweeted a simple, "with the clip." Senator Cory Booker shared the moment with the caption, "This is how truth sounds when it's calm and unafraid." Even Republicans. Senator Lisa Murkowski commented in an interview, "You may not agree with her politics, but that was poise under fire. Hard not to respect it." Meanwhile, Trump's appearances took a hit. His next rally saw a significant dip in turnout. Memes of his blank stare, post-Crockett, circled relentlessly. Late-night comedians carved entire monologues out of his stunned silence. Colbert dubbed him the human Wi-Fi weak signal when challenged. The moment became a barometer. Was your feed reposting Crockett's words? Were your friends texting you the meme? Had your mom asked, "Who is this woman, and where can I vote for her?" Because millions said it out loud. She said what we were all thinking. In classrooms, students quoted her sentence during debates. In churches, pastors referenced it in sermons about truth and humility. One librarian in Michigan printed the line on a poster titled, "Modern American Rhetoric." It was being studied, shared, and sermonized. But it wasn't just about Trump anymore. It was about what he had represented and what Jasmine had dismantled in under a minute. She didn't match hate with hate. She didn't meet mockery with mockery. She offered clarity, and that's what spread. Not just the fire of the words, but the calm of their delivery, the strength in restraint, the invitation to dignity in an age of noise, because that sentence, those 30 words didn't just call out a man, it called up a nation. But Crockett wasn't done. She took it further, turning insult into inspiration. 2 days later, Jasmine Crockett sat across from a journalist on a live stream viewed by over 6 million people in 24 hours. She wore a gray blazer, no makeup crew, no teleprompter. Just a quiet room, a thoughtful expression, and a voice that now carried the weight of a movement. The journalist leaned in. "Congresswoman, that moment with Trump, that sentence, people are calling it historic. How do you see it?" Crockett smiled faintly, eyes steady. "It's not about me," she said. "It's about every woman who's ever been told to shut up. Every black girl labeled difficult just for asking questions. Every immigrant who changed their name so someone would listen." She paused. "It's about all of us who've been underestimated, dismissed, and told our voice was too much or not enough." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved. Crockett continued, "I've been called worse than moron, and I've heard better insults from people with less power. But when Trump said that word, I knew it wasn't just an insult to me. It was a test of how we respond when dignity is dragged through the mud." "And how did you respond?" the journalist asked. "I didn't yell," she said. "I didn't shrink. I told the truth." She leaned forward slightly, voice firm but warm. "You don't have to shout to be heard. But when you speak, speak like it matters. Because someone's listening who's never heard their story echoed before." The clip would be replayed in classrooms, quoted in graduation speeches, carved into captions, and replayed in the heads of young women staring into mirrors before job interviews, courtroom arguments, campaign launches. Because Crockett didn't just offer a rebuttal. She offered a mirror and a message. That clarity can be more powerful than chaos. That calm isn't weakness, and that there is nothing more threatening to the arrogant than a woman who knows who she is. She spoke about her district, about public service, about showing up for those who never get mic time. "Leadership isn't about who yells the loudest," she said. "It's about who listens longest. It's about who carries the voices of others when they've been silenced." And the insult? She never used Trump's name again in that interview, never repeated the slur. Because the message wasn't about him anymore. It had outgrown him. Crockett turned pain into purpose. She took a slur and transformed it into a sentence that shook the country awake. A young woman posted a TikTok, eyes watery, whispering, "I didn't know I needed to hear that. But I did." An elder in Georgia reposted the clip with a note. "This is the tone of justice." A high school student in Arizona printed the quote on a poster that now hangs in their hallway. "Speak like it matters." Crockett hadn't just answered an insult. She'd rewritten the rules of engagement. No longer would dignity be confused with passivity. No longer would calm be mistaken for weakness. No longer would silence be accepted as surrender. She gave voice to the silenced, not by amplifying herself, but by inviting everyone in. And Jasmine's final message? That America is at its best when it listens to the ones it once tried to silence. The signs were gone now. The chants faded. The cameras mostly packed up. But Jasmine Crockett was still there, walking quietly through the crowd, not as a celebrity, not even as a victor, but as a reminder. A reminder that this had never been just a protest. It wasn't about who had the microphone first, or who shouted loudest. It wasn't about party lines or podiums. It was about power and how it's used. About voices and who we choose to listen to. She didn't storm a stage. She didn't demand a spotlight. She answered an insult with integrity, and left the noise behind. And the people noticed. One by one they watched her go. Not in awe of spectacle, but in quiet reverence for something rarer. Strength rooted in service. Truth spoken without permission. Dignity that didn't ask for applause. That day, Trump came looking for a moment. Jasmine Crockett left him with a movement. So now, the question isn't what she said. It's what you will do, because this story doesn't end here. It's yours now if you choose to carry it. Subscribe if dignity wins in your book. Share this if you've ever been called less than what you are. And remember, you don't have to yell to be heard. But when you speak, speak like it matters.